Hi, my name is Vera. I'm a gouache painter from St. Paul, Minnesota, and welcome to my new YouTube channel. I paint in a shared space, which you can see behind me. I've been working here out of this studio for about 2.5 years. I share it with 12 other incredibly talented painters and artists. We're called the Old Town Artists Cooperative, and I am by far the youngest member of this group, but that just means that I get tons of advice and support. I've learned so much from every single person who's in this group, and I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of it. I did walk here today. Fun fact about me is I don't have a car. I live downtown, and so this studio is only about 8 blocks from my house. My day job is only about 3 blocks from my house. I work in hospitality. I'm not a full-time artist. That is one of the dreams that I have. Getting into making longer form content is that maybe someday I can do this full-time. So today I just wanted to take you on a little bit of a tour, introduce myself, and we're also going to paint a small painting together. So let's get into it. To get started, you should know that I am a fantasy painter. My dream is to work completely in imaginative realism, and I do really love the idea of working on children's books. I also love the idea of teaching, and really just painting full-time is my goal. This book, Imaginative Realism by James Gurney, is really what kind of shoehorned in that idea for me. You'll see throughout all of my work that I am working mostly from life right now. I think that you need to have a strong foundation in working from life to be able to create whatever you want, whatever dream world you're trying to build. So that's where I'm at right now. Let's talk a little bit about my must-have supplies. One thing that I cannot work without is these Jack Richardson paper palettes. These are made out of a toned gray paper, which really helps me with mixing colors because I am still pretty much an amateur. So this really helps me with putting down the correct colors, the correct values, making sure that my lights and darks are correct. I work specifically in Holbein acrylic gouache. I do supplement this with some Liquitex acrylic gouache, but you can see I love to paint almost straight from the tube, so I do keep a very large collection of colors. Because I'm so new and mixing colors and color theory are so complicated, it's very nice to be able to pick out a color that's very close to the color that I need to mix in order to help me achieve my end goals faster. Because I do work a day job, I don't always have the amount of time that a full-time painter would have to put into a piece, and so shortcuts like having pre-mixed colors is really helpful. I also typically only work on a toned canvas, so it's not just my mixing papers, it's also watercolor paper in a nice toned color. You can see I've almost gone through this whole Hahnemühle toned paper watercolor paper pad. I do find that watercolor paper is my favorite canvas per se for painting in gouache. My second runner-up to that would be canvas panel. This is a ruined panel that I accidentally got a little bit of oil paint on, but this was painted with acrylic gouache. So yeah, note to self, maybe don't use your oil paints when you have other paintings out on your desk table. But anyway, this is a very thin canvas board. This one is from Artist's Loft. I get most of my supplies from Michael's and also my local art store, which is called Wet Paint. Shout out to Wet Paint. I have been painting, like I said, for 2.5 years, and they have been instrumental in helping me not only get the supplies that I need, but answering questions about technique, supplies. I'm very interested in learning how to plein air paint, which is huge here in Minnesota, and they have been a priceless resource. I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate having them so close to me. I can just take a quick bus ride to get to them, and then I go there and I spend all of my money. So moving on. For basics that I use a ton of, Holbein tends to be a little bit expensive, so I do supplement with a fairly cheaper brand, which is Liquitex. The Liquitex acrylic gouaches are by far my favorite for basics. This Mars black is the perfect black, and this titanium white is the perfect white. I mix this, I probably go through 3 bottles of this in a month and a half period. I use it for everything. So this is like, if I had to put together a kit of things that I absolutely have to be painting with, Liquitex titanium white, for sure. I do have a couple of things that I also really love as mediums. There's this golden open thinner, which has been, as an acrylic artist, because I work with gouache and I work with watercolor and I work with regular straight up acrylic, it slows down your drying time, which is really helpful for mixing, for layering. Can't get enough of it. I absolutely love this. This is my second bottle. It's recently purchased. We're gonna need some more soon. Then my second one is the Liquitex Matte Medium. I actually picked this up on a recommendation from Jim Musil, who is an incredibly successful content creator from here, from Minnesota. He mixes liquid acrylic paints with this medium to paint with, and I loved the texture of it. I use this both to extend my colors so that I can mix greater amounts if I'm working larger, and also as a finisher, like a varnish, if I want my pieces to be finished matte. My super secret life hack for being a gouache painter is colored pencil. And it's because colored pencil, especially on watercolor paper or those thin canvas panels that I use, you can layer colored pencil easily over dried gouache, dried watercolor, dried gouache, and that makes it so helpful for small details, for radiance when it comes to painting light. These are instrumental in that, and I specifically only use Prismacolor Premier colored pencils. I get these from Wet Paint. I bought them each individually, one at a time, when I needed a specific color. I feel like if I could go back, I would actually buy the set, but it is what it is. I generally use Princeton brushes. I find them to be, at least these long-handled ones, when I'm working larger, they just are superior when it comes to control. Sorry about that, shared space. And I can use these interchangeably with both my aqua-based oils and my acrylics and gouaches. I'm very inexperienced at painting with oils. I've actually only really started learning within the past 8 months, and I am still very intimidated by it and don't do it often, but it's nice to have brushes that I can use. And because I used water-based, water-soluble oil paints, I can continue to use my brushes for all of the purposes that I need them for. Okay, I've moved into my AirPod audio now. We're gonna go ahead and get started on painting for today. You can see these paintings behind me. I'm currently putting together a show with 3 other incredibly talented female painters from here in the cities. So I was kind of putting together some of my recent pieces to get ready to hang. I will make my next video about framing. I feel like it's a very gate-kept part of being an artist, and as someone who's 2.5 years in, I do have some pretty significant things to say about it, so we'll definitely get into that, but let's get started clearing this out. So we will be working on this toned tan paper that I absolutely love. This is from Hanamule. This is a 95-pound watercolor paper, and I'm going to tape it onto my drafting table. I got this drafting table as a gift from my best friend Cynthia, who was no longer using it, and it has been amazing for working this way. When I'm working on canvas panel, I typically work on my easel. When I'm working on paper, I like to work on a drafting table. It's just much more ergonomic. For the tape, I'm using Nichiban watercolor tape. I get this from Wet Paint as well. It's incredibly cheap. I think this roll was $2, and it's a perfect, crisp, clear line. I've never had a problem with it bleeding, peeling up, anything like that, and I abuse it. So let's get to it. All right, now that we are all set up, I'm going to show you how I search for references. So when I am working from life. I'm working from photos in my camera roll. I love to photograph. I do have a Sony a6000 that I use for taking photos when we're traveling. I recently went to the Minnesota Arboretum with my parents, which was incredibly beautiful. So we're going to be painting a piece either from a recent trip to California or from my trip to the Minnesota Arboretum. One of the coolest things about having my iPad, I've had this for about 6 years. I bought it through Verizon and paid it off like a phone. And it was just so incredibly instrumental in my artistic journey. I love my iPad. I do use Procreate, is the software that I prefer to use as an artist. On the iPad, you'll see that I have a piece that I painted recently up on here right now. One thing that I love about Procreate specifically is I can manipulate the photos, I can edit the brightness, I can edit parts of the composition that I want out. And then also, because I am so new and because I am still learning color theory, I can color pick places here where maybe I might not know, what is this color here on the bottom of this white flower, right? And so I pick it and it tells me where it is on the color wheel and how to mix it. So this has been an instrumental tool in learning how to paint. I definitely recommend this for any amateur painter, any beginner painter. And the software I think was $10. I bought it once and I've been using it without upgrades, with wonderful software updates for 6 years. So let's go through my camera roll. All right, we've got our reference prepped and ready. I've imported this into Procreate so that I can manipulate it at will. You can probably tell from this distance that the values here get a little bit muddy. What I really want the focus of this painting to be is this staircase and then these beautiful trees kind of creating a natural frame around it. So what I am going to do is, you'll see during this process, I'm going to get rid of kind of this area here because it's blending in with the steps. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to maybe tint this a little bit more green. I can't remember who it was that said that God does not give perfect compositions to mediocre artists. And so that's a fancy way of saying that an artist needs to be able to look at a composition, look at a reference, and change it for the better to make it more agreeable. So let's go ahead and get started. I begin with a sketch. I'm sketching with just a regular graphite pencil. I think this one is a 2B, maybe a 4B. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lay down my darkest points. I really kind of base my paintings off of the darkest places in the painting. I'm starting with an aqua and a little titanium white here, a little sap green, and a little bit light yellow, just mixing in those background leaf shapes using a square edged brush. For these, I'm using a filbert, the trees themselves, and layering this lighter yellow over. I do really love the sap green and yellow combination. I think it's perfect for a very sunny day. The burnt umber and black with a little bit of sap green is going in to help lay these initial things, and then the shadow on the ground that I was really hoping to capture is just a little bit of white Mars black and a little bit of aqua because the shadow is so cool. Here I start to layer using a filbert as well, so I'm just going to be laying down patches of light and sun, kind of adjusting my values as I go. I've put a little log in the foreground there, as you can see. So I go in these big green patches. The most important thing is just to get your values correct. The details take care of themselves. Your eye really tricks itself into thinking that it sees more than it sees. So I'm just laying as many little tiny details as possible, making sure that my value shifts are correct, and then I go in and lay these big shapes. These trees I really wanted to make sure made it into this because they kind of frame the composition so nicely, so naturally. Whoever plans that at the Arboretum, give them a hand. The last point that I need to work on in this is just making sure that all of the little pieces make it in. There's going to be some smaller leaf shapes, some of these really beautiful willowy plants kind of hidden in the landscape. So you'll see I'm just going to go in and add tiny pieces here, a leaf there, making sure that the value shifts where the sun is coming through the tree cover is correct. I love how this turned out. Here's my signature, and I'll pass it on back. She's finished. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, for seeing my studio, getting to know me, and painting this painting with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm an open book. I would love to tell you about my pieces, process, and everything else. And I'll see you next time.